The courtroom buzzed. This story started 25 years earlier when Ms. Cayce was born, and a man known as Mr. Otis Hawkins signed the birth certificate believing that he was the biological father of little Cayce. But unfortunately, the relationship collapsed and Mr. Hawkins walked away from Ms. Ewing's life. But as Ms. Cayce was growing up, Mr. Edwards appeared, claiming that he was in a sexual relationship with Ms. Ewing at the time Ms. Cayce was conceived. Therefore, he is sure Ms. Cayce is his daughter. Ms. Ewing insisted she was 100% sure that Mr. Hawkins, who was deceased, was her daughter's biological father. The confusion created by the two conflicting claims forced Ms. Cayce to drag her mother and Mr. Edwards before Judge Lauren Lake's paternity court to discover the truth. The first twist in the hearing was the appearance of Mr. Hawkins, who was located through the court's help. When the court orderly escorted Mr. Hawkins into the court, the atmosphere was recharged by shock and bewilderment. Seeing a man who was believed to have died appearing to debunk the story of Ms. Ewing relating to his whereabouts. Is this a sign of other lies from Ms. Ewing? Anticipation hung heavy in the air. After all the parties had presented their positions in this case, which was now full of unknown results, it was time to reveal the paternity results. Ms. Cayce, a young woman on the cusp of 25, sat nervously beside her mother, Miss Ewing. For years, she'd believed that her father was deceased, a man she knew only through her mother's stories. Now, after more than 2 decades, a paternity case had brought them to this very moment. Judge Lauren Lake, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, sat poised, ready to announce the DNA test results that would either confirm what Ms. Cayce had always been told or shatter her world. The air crackled with tension. Judge Lake spoke, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "Ms. Cayce, we have the DNA test results before us." Her eyes met the young woman's. "These results will definitively prove paternity." Ms. Cayce held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was it. In the case of Ms. Cayce versus Mr. Edwards, the DNA test concludes. Judge Lake paused, heightening the suspense. Mr. Edwards is not the father. A collective gasp filled the room. The result now points to Mr. Hawkins as the next possible biological father. The conclusion was that the judge was going to pronounce Mr. Hawkins as the biological father of Ms. Cayce. Ms. Cayce's blood ran cold. This wasn't happening. It was like a dream came through in her mind. Her mother had been so sure. Who was her father? Throughout the years, Miss Ewing had painted a picture of a loving, if short-lived, relationship with Mr. Hawkins. He was her high school sweetheart, the one who got away. Tragically, he was shot shortly after Miss Cayce's birth, and the end of the relationship, leaving Miss Ewing to raise their daughter alone, because even Mr. Edwards was never around to play the father figure. The next result is that of Ms. Cayce and Mr. Hawkins. Lauren Lake's voice echoed through the quiet courtroom. The DNA result determines that Mr. Hawkins is not the father. It was a heartbreaking tale, one that Miss Cayce had never expected. Miss Ewing's story had been consistent and unwavering even in the court. She spoke of Mr. Hawkins with a fondness that seemed genuine, her eyes misting over as she shared anecdotes of their time together. Her grief, she claimed, was too profound to allow another man to fill the void left by Mr. Hawkins. Miss Cayce had grown up with her mother's heartbreak as a constant backdrop. She'd felt the weight of it, the unspoken sorrow that lingered in their small apartment. The thought of her father, lost too soon, had been a source of both pain and comfort. Now it seemed that narrative has crumbling around her. The paternity court went silent. The two possible fathers have been pronounced not to be the father. The judge's usual next question was to Ms. Ewing. Now that both men are not her father, do you know who is Ms. Cayce's father? Ms. Ewing paused for seconds before making the revelation that no one expected. His brother. Adding fuel to the fire was the fact that Mr. Hawkins, the presumed deceased father, was not the father. And now Ms. Ewing is claiming that Mr. Hawkins' brother was the possible father after 25 years. Do you think she was telling the truth? I assume the whole court was not believing any word from Ms. Ewing. The gasp that rippled through the room was audible. Miss Cayce's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Hawkins looked at Ms. Ewing with disbelief. I suspected that she was cheating on me, but not with my brother. Judge Lauren Lake asked if Mr. Hawkins' brother will be available to take the paternity test to bring closure to the young woman who has been devastated by the results. How can a mother deceive her daughter for 25 years, to the point of lying before a judge? Please subscribe and click the notification bell for updates on this story and other interesting true life stories. like, and share.